Welcome back to part 2 of our discussion of scanning, diagnostics, and calibrations. If you missed part 1, I'd highly recommend you dial in so you can catch the full context of the conversation that we had with these 4 industry leaders. Hi, my name is Dan Risley, and I am with CCC Intelligence Solutions, and I am here at iCar's brand new, state-of-the-art, 48,000 square foot training center. Now, be more specific, we're actually inside of 6,000 square feet that's solely dedicated to an ADAS lab. And with me today, I have 4 industry experts that have a lot of knowledge and deep operational and technical knowledge that they're going to share with all of you today. They're going to share their insight, they're going to share their wisdom, and they're going to share their experiences with you. And our goal today is that when we're all done, that we're going to answer some of the questions that you might have, maybe your staff, and maybe perhaps even some of your business partners. That being said, I'm going to ask each one of you to please introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest, and maybe your role or responsibility specific to scanning and calibrations.
Sure. So my name is Bud Center, Director of Technical Products and Curriculum at iCar. Been in this industry for a very long time. I hate to say the years, but it's rapidly approaching 40. So I've been doing it a long time. My interest in this, obviously, with iCar, it's all about training and getting this information out to the industry, getting everybody to understand it and to adapt the OEM procedures and requirements.
Welcome.
Thanks, Dan, and that was quite the intro. Nicely done. My name is Arlo Johnson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Commercial Programs for Driven Brands, and I support their collision vertical of business. For the past several years, I've been working directly with insurance and OEM business partners, developing programs that help to add value to our network. And I'm very happy to be here today. Obviously, scanning and diagnostics is a big topic of conversation amongst insurers and OEMs in our shops, and anything that we can do to help demystify the aspects of all of that and get the word out, help more of our body shops engage in these practices in-house, it's time well spent. So appreciate the time here today.
Welcome, Arlo.
Darrell Amberson. I'm the President of Operations for LaMettry's Collision. We have 10 collision locations in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. We've been embracing ADAS work now for approaching 10 years. I'd like to think we're early adapters. A lot of passion for it. Mostly it's about trying to do the right thing for the consumer and for our business. I also involve myself some in some industry relations and functions and things like that, including finishing a 2-year term right now as being CIC chairman.
Welcome, Darrell.
Thank you.
Good morning. Dane Rounckles with American Honda Motor Company. I am the collision marketing manager for American Honda National. I represent our certified network and our collision programs for our dealers to allow parts procurement. I've been in the automotive industry for many years, probably about 35 years, many years at the dealer, and then as a collision field rep, and now as national manager.
Welcome, Dane.
Thank you.
We have a really diverse panel of people here, which is great because we're going to get a whole bunch of different perspectives. And all of you obviously have subject matter expertise, either operational or technical. Arlo, when Driven Brands decided to kind of go down this path of partnering with service providers, you probably had some goals or some thoughts in mind. Why was Driven Brands what were they looking to do when you were partnering with service providers? And really, what are your goals around scanning and calibrations for the organization?
Sure, and as I've articulated already, in-house scans and calibrations is I think key to just the long-term success of our network and our shops, and our body shops are getting squeezed left, right, and center on margin, right? And here you have this kind of newish opportunity to engage in a new line of business, and you have the opportunity to keep some of that in-house and make a nice margin off of that, right? So why would you push that out? Why not try to keep it inside, right? So that's definitely been one of our goals is to educate our shops, get them, those that are willing, capable, and able to kind of take the leap. It's not necessarily easy to take the leap, right? It's a little scary. There's liability concerns, there's equipment concerns, there's technician concerns, right? So helping to get our stores to understand, hey, you've got the right setup where you can start to investigate this and move in that direction and help to facilitate that. The other primary goal for us, and this is more from a corporate end, is in the data and the information, right? So the more we can organize our information and have better data to help to share with our business partners, we can have better conversations about our scanning practices that align and calibrate with their guidelines, and that way we make a better outcome at the end of the day and facilitate reimbursement and oversight at the shop level.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Darrell, how about you? What sort of goals do you have for your organization as it relates to scanning and calibrations? I think I heard you mention B2B, and I'm not sure where you were going with that, but
We are embracing getting work from other entities, not just collision repairs, but also others, including fleets and mechanical shops, because as this grows, not everybody's going to have the capability to be able to do it. The space requirements, the equipment, the expertise, and so we're going to embrace that. And that's not going to be for everybody. This is a new business model. And I had a conversation with our owner recently, and I said, this is not like a 20 group where you can go and get KPIs and data and benchmarks and things like that. It's all new. We're kind of finding our way. So again, it's not for everybody, but also there's a lot of opportunity, and this is just coming. It's going to affect everybody in the auto repair industry.
Thanks. And Dane, what about you? What goals does Honda have around this topic?
Ultimately, to deliver a safe vehicle back to the consumer and delivering the information to the shops in the industry to be able to properly repair. And, there's not one answer that, can be given for every location or every DRP agreement or whatever, but we want to make sure that the information is out there, whether you sublet it or do it in-house, that you have the data to do the correct repair. The number of vehicles that are being returned back out on the road without that post-scan, right, or the calibration are unknown to us, but it's a big fear of how many are being returned.
And you didn't say it, but you indirectly said it, and that is, I think maybe one of the goals is 2.0 scans in every car, because you said every car is supposed to have pre and post, right?
Absolutely.
So a goal has to be 2 scans per car. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but it sounds like it.
Post scans for delivery, and I don't know that it's all the proper calibrations are happening, and that's our biggest concern, and we need to find out what we can do to move this along for the consumer.
Bud, over to you from an iCar perspective. Obviously, one of your goals was to deliver curriculum, and we're seeing a great calibration or an ADAS center here now. What other goals does iCar have relative to this topic?
Well, I think our goal remains the same in most of these areas. You talked a little bit about, we need to have the training. We need to have we need to make our training accessible and relevant to all of these topics, but then it needs to be, you talked about, you want the right repair for the consumer, right? And if you look at iCar's vision, it's, that everybody in the industry has the information, knowledge, and skills to to perform a complete, safe, and quality repair for the ultimate benefit of the consumer. So what are we looking at? We want to have all of this training so that we can address this skills proficiency. It's one thing to have the knowledge, but to be able to apply it, to actually go out there and do it. So now we've developed these skills proficiency courses to help the industry. We recognize the gap, that we talk to people in the industry, and there's a big gap out there, that this is new. Darrell talked about it earlier. This is a new skill set to the collision industry, but it's one that it's an absolute must. You have to have it. So our goal is to get out there, get this training out there, get people trained so that they can repair these vehicles properly.
I'll add to that. I've read the repair procedures for Honda and calibration procedures. I've read them, but I can't come in here and do them. So reading them and doing them are two different things. Very so. Yep.
So earlier in the conversation, I heard you guys touch on the word test drive. And test drive, I think, has evolved over the years as well. A test drive many, many years ago involved going into a parking lot and maybe finding a hole somewhere to see if the suspension rattles, or pulling the car up to the garage door and checking the headlights to make sure that they're level. So again, dating myself. Darrell, I think it was maybe you that mentioned test drive. Talk a little bit about the evolution of the test drive, because I've heard examples anecdotally, and maybe you can give some specifics where the test drive, maybe to do a dynamic calibration, a test drive just to assure that everything's working, isn't a 5-minute lap around the block. Tell us more.
The old test drive, we would oftentimes get up to highway speed, let go of the steering wheel, see if it's car's pulling or not, checking for vibrations, wind noises. That's still important. You still want to do these things, and we should do a better job, frankly, as an industry. But this additional work is something altogether new. We refer to them as dynamic systems verifications because it takes somebody that understands how the ADAS system is supposed to behave and getting them out on the vehicle out on the road and putting it through its paces and engaging all these systems to make sure that they're really working the way they're supposed to. That requires a higher level of competence and oftentimes a longer drive to be able to complete all of that. And it should not be confused with a dynamic calibration. A dynamic calibration is when you have a scan tool connected and you're out on the road and the vehicle is picking up road signs, stripes, and lines and things like that, and it's calibrating itself. That's a different function. You might be able to do some of this on the same trip after you've completed that, then maybe you drive it further and then you engage all these systems, but they are two different things. But very, very important, and I would suggest that as a repairer, I think when in doubt, perform the dynamic systems verification just to make sure. Because like I said, the cars can have maybe up to 1,300 different fault codes, but it still doesn't pick up absolutely everything. They've done a great job of finding a lot of areas where things can go wrong, but there can still be things that go wrong that may not trip a fault code. And again, calibrations, it might show a successful calibration, but there still might be something awry that would show up then on that drive.
I think Bud's daughter was probably the best example we can give, where the system was calibrated or wasn't calibrated. But if we had made the guess that or leap that it was calibrated, it wasn't until the test drive that it wasn't working.
Right. So I'm going to be your storyteller again, Dan. So we went out on another one of these adventures where we went out and visited some folks. It's all part of our research. And we went to a collision repair shop, and they were just saying, hey, come on in, and they were going to show us their remote service and how they did that. But they said, here, this car's in the done line. We don't need anything, but you can use that as your example. And it was a vehicle that had been in for hail repair. And the car was, again, in the done line, ready to go back to the customer. As part of our process and what we were doing, we test drive the vehicle. We weren't driving, but the company we were visiting was test driving. We're recording it, and we go out, and the adaptive cruise doesn't work. So we're rapidly approaching a vehicle in front of us, and the vehicle's not slowing down. So we go back and start talking a little bit more about what did they do to the vehicle, and they said it was just a hail repair. But in doing that hail repair, they pulled the front bumper cover off.
Okay.
On this particular vehicle, the sensor that controls the adaptive cruise is one that you set with a bubble level, and it's just adjustment that way. At some point, taking the cover off or putting it back on, they bumped that sensor, and it was no longer calibrated. So they didn't know that. It didn't set any codes. They did a test drive, but didn't test the adaptive cruise. And now you get a customer in a car, a customer panics because, oh my God, I'm approaching this car and it's not stopping, and you have a problem. So it's that type of thing. The test drive is critical. It's not what it used to be.
And that was just a hail job.
That was just a hail repair.
Wow, that is crazy.
You get some of these calibrations that Darrell was talking about with the dynamic calibrations. These aren't things where you can go out and make a quick lap around the block and it's calibrated. We've had weather conditions will make a difference a lot of times in how quickly the system will calibrate when you're doing a dynamic calibration in a drive. You have, in some cases, you have to maintain a certain speed for a certain distance. And when you get out there and you're trying to do those things and you're in, I don't know, New York or whatever, and you're trying to get in and out of traffic, you're going to have a hard time, maintaining that speed and doing it. So there's a lot of things that play into it.
Another example, we had a vehicle that was hit in the back of the fender. Our people elected to partially remove a bumper cover, a D&C, because we didn't want to have a paint line around the front of it. And so fortunately our collision people interacted with mechanical or ADAS people and said, does this need a calibration? Because we really didn't take it off, but we just loosened it and moved it. And our people, based upon our understanding of the factory repair procedures, I think we should calibrate it. They did that and fortunately found an issue. That radar system in the front had been popped loose from its mounting bracket, gotten loose, not from the technician pulling it, it was probably from the impact, and it was pointing at a point probably 3 feet in front of the car. And because it was still connected and it was functioning, there was no fault codes. But it did, fortunately, show up in a calibration. Had we not done that, that system interacts with the automated emergency braking system. So in other words, if in that emergency braking situation, that wouldn't have activated that system until virtually the car was upon impact.
Wow.
And so fortunately, we found it through that calibration. So another good reason why we do it.
All great examples. So, Bud, I heard you touch on the test drive. I heard you say maybe take a video camera so you could show what you're doing or take a video of it. I want to start to shift focus here because we haven't spent any time talking about documentation and the importance of it. So I think we're in a completely different world now when you talk about ADAS type features on a car and repairing those. You know, we just can't take it for granted it's done, right? And if somebody says, did you take it for a test drive? Yeah, of course I did. Everything works fine and away we go. So Arlo, I'm sure part of the reasoning you're partnering with some of those service providers was probably documentation, but maybe you could talk a little bit about the importance of documentation and what kind of education are you sharing with your franchisees relative to, I think you need to start incorporating more, whatever you're including now,
Sure.
do more.
Yeah, absolutely. Documentation key. Again, a reason why we went with those service providers. And again, the integration with CCC, providing a nice flow of documentation of the scan reports, which are necessary to, avoid friction when you're trying to get towards reimbursement, right? So again, it falls back on, are we simply, providing a position statement and expecting to get reimbursed in every time in every situation? Are we, going one layer deeper and providing, repair procedures or proper scan documentation, et cetera, to explain the why, to our insurance partners, so that way you avoid friction in that reimbursement process. So we certainly coach our stores to go to that level. We have our center review team that is, looking at documentation before we're uploading to carriers to make sure that things are supported appropriately. And obviously, the more documentation we provide, it just, removes a lot of the friction in the process.
No, friction, maybe potential liability even further down the road for the shop, right? I mean, we want to make sure that system's operating, and I want to be able to show that it's operating. And Darrell, I think your group, I've been to your shop a few times, I think your group probably is one of those, I don't want to say take it to the extreme, but maybe it's more like this is the benchmark perhaps. So tell us what sort of things you're doing relative to documentation, and maybe things that people aren't even thinking about.
A scan should include a report that shows what systems have a fault code and which do not, and then of course what the fault codes are. And beyond that, it should also be able to show the scan tool that you use to make sure that you're using a current version and that it's a good legitimate scan tool. And that should be part of the documentation process. And the more automation we can get going forward, the better. When we started out, we were creating a lot of PDFs and things like that and putting that into our management system to document it. Now, calibrations require even more. We take photographs of target replacements and things like that. We want to show that. We want to show proof that we looked up the factory repair information, that we used a current version of the factory repair information, and then typically we take a screenshot of the scan tool showing calibration successful. Now, we've been dabbling with some different calibration systems. There are some are aftermarket, some are endorsed by manufacturers. They all do basically the same sort of thing in terms of how they place the targets relevant to where the manufacturer tells us, and different ways of doing it, and that's okay as long as it gets it to that precise point where we're supposed to be and using the correct target, of course. So you want to document that. Some of these systems now even go some steps beyond that to really help you, that will, through automation, show you specifically how many millimeters the target was away from the car, the height it was, to really verify that you really are precisely in the right spot. So it takes it to a level beyond just that photograph. But certainly we want to do that. I should mention too, another good source for information on these topics is SECA. SECA had a scan committee first and then a calibration committee, and created a very good piece of work describing how a lot of this should be done, could be done, good recommended procedures, as well as a flow chart. And you talk about scans, it's not uncommon. We're doing a half a dozen scans on a car. What the manufacturers are talking about are prudent in terms of when we do it, and we should be sticking to what they tell us to do. But it's also, if you're going to start a calibration, for example, a technician may want to do a scan on it just to make sure there's no fault codes, because fault codes could appear at any time. Something has happened, but you may tear down the car and maybe something else has happened, and all of a sudden there's more codes in the car that weren't there during that pre-scan, and you want to know about that before you go into the calibration.
Wait a minute, hang on. You said something that's interesting. So you're telling me that you have instances where you do a scan, pre-repair scan, and there's 0 DTCs. So I've heard a lot of people say, hey, if there's 0 DTCs on the pre-scan, there's absolutely no need to do a post-scan because there was 0. And I think what I just heard you say is that you have instances where you did the pre-scan, 0,
Correct.
disassembled the vehicle, scanned, and then identified there was DTCs.
Correct. And some DTCs don't occur until they get to a certain number of key cycles or a certain time. And so hence it's the importance of following up on this to make sure that something didn't occur or pop up that you didn't expect.
There are other pieces of that as well. And I would say that it probably happens more often than not that you have codes that appear in the post-scan that you didn't have in the pre-scan. And it's simple things like you disconnected headlights, you disconnected different things, you turn the key on to move the vehicle around the shop, and it sets a code because that stuff had been disconnected. So it's going to be pretty common.
Pull a windshield.
Yep.
Throws a code. You know, one of the things when documenting, you know, it's important whenever you're going to correct a code or whatever to document your corrective action. So that if you have to start chasing down a problem, you have the steps that you've been through, what it took you to get there. So it's important to document all the way to the final repair, not just that you scanned it, but what you did to correct.
Dane, do you have any requirements of your certified shop? So I'm sure there may be a couple of certified shops that might be listening. When it comes to your certified repair program, is there any requirements relative to documentation that all the shops should be aware of?
Other than pre and post at this time, no, we do not. We are looking at repair procedure documentation at this time, but excuse me, currently, no, I do not.
So, but tell me a little bit more about that, because you just said, okay, you have to have pre and post documentation, but that doesn't really tell me what I need to have.
Pre and post documentation is a copy of the OEM native scan developed through the OEM software. And we have it logo marked to show that it was through the OEM software. And that is what they will have to provide for their certification.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification on that. There's a famous court case a couple years back where a car was repaired improperly and they didn't follow OEM repair procedures. And you know, as we start to talk about ADAS features and the safety and things like that, I start to wonder if, you know, is the industry, you know, potentially going to be put in similar position to that specific case because a car was, you know, not repaired properly because they didn't follow along with the OEM repair procedures. And I don't want to go along and say, hey, what do you think? Is that possible? Well, of course the answer is, but we could be sued for anything, right?
Right.
But what can we as an industry do to keep ourselves from being put in that position? Anybody have any thoughts on that? I'm just going to throw it out there as a topic. What can we do as an industry to, and the answer can't be look at OEM repair procedures. So it has to be more than that because we know that's a default answer, right?
Develop a process within the shop. You know, that you've done your pre and post scans, you've done your corrective action, but don't return the vehicle back until you know it's safe. I understand that we're under time constraints to get it back to the consumer, but at the end of the day, returning a vehicle that's not safe is not a benefit. And, you know, the shop has to want to do the right thing, right? And I understand I'm not going to get into all the political side of, you know, between the DRPs and all of that, who pays for what, you know, but the fact is the shop needs to develop a process for every car, every repair, regardless of how minor or major the repair is, and stick to it and follow it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna pare it back what I think I heard in one word, or two words, three words. Don't assume.
Right.
Don't assume. And I think in the examples that Darrell and Bud both gave, I'm going to make the assumption that I'm doing a hail job and I probably don't need to do anything with scanning or calibrations because it's simply a hail job. So don't make assumptions in this because it could put you at, you know, give you some exposure.
I can tell you that one of the things, and it's not just because Darrell's here, but one of the things that I saw at LaMettry that I think is pretty cool is that you guys actually, on the window of the vehicle, you write down everything that vehicle needs. And then after your guys come in and they do the pre-scan, they'll write on there, these are the calibrations this vehicle's going to need when it's done, so that there's nobody that can say they didn't know. You know, and they check these things off as they're completed, so everybody that's involved in the repair process can just look at the window on the vehicle and you know everything that needs to be done to the car.
Makes sense?
Yeah, I
think it's about doing the right thing, right? You know it needs to be done. Don't conform to whatever pressures are pushing you in one direction or the other, right? Stay true to your customer. Stay true to the OEM repair procedures. If you may or may not get reimbursed for a certain procedure, that shouldn't impact your willingness or interest in doing the right thing, right? So do the right thing. We certainly advocate for all of our shops to get reimbursed appropriately from business partners. We know it doesn't always happen, but that shouldn't change your outcome or your focus on what you're doing with that vehicle.
That's a really good point, Arlo, and I'll add one more thing. So you mentioned, hey, regardless if you're getting reimbursed or not, you should be doing the right thing. I'll also say, if you should make that choice, make sure you still document what you did.
Absolutely. Really good point.
Document what you did, document what you did, document what you did.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think, to your point, we need to change our thinking. Safety has to be number one. We take all these factors into consideration: cycle time, customer convenience, cost. Obviously, that's always been an issue, and obviously we all want lower cost and competitive insurance premiums, all that sort of thing. I get it. But we have to change our thinking that safety has to trump that. That it isn't all about whatever we're getting paid for, we're not getting paid for, what somebody wants. We need to talk more about what is the right thing to do. And then also understanding our industry is quite slow to react. For those of us that have been around a while, we've seen a lot of changes, and we tend to take 1, 2, 3 years, sometimes even more, before we evolve. We've seen it in blend times and all sorts of structural rates and all sorts of things that have evolved as vehicles have changed that eventually become the norm in the industry. So sometimes you have to just do the right thing and for example, as much as we try to get paid for every scan, we're going to do 2 scans. We don't get paid for it. Hopefully in the long run, we're going to change the culture of our relationships with insurers and customers that eventually we will, and keep that effort up. But doing the right thing should always trump everything else.
Yeah. And as we, I know this is probably for a different conversation, so I'll just have one quick comment and we'll leave it. But as the electric vehicle market grows, the need for this is going to go up substantially.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Because there are going to be more things that you need to monitor on that vehicle while it's in. There are going to be more things you need to confirm or correct before that vehicle goes back to the owner. Just having the vehicle in the shop and monitoring battery while it's in there. It's not just it's charge or discharge. You have to watch the battery balancing and all of those things while it's in the shop. So there's going to be more need for this.
Yeah, there are other parts of the world that are more conscientious about this sort of thing in terms of inspections and culture, respect to factory repair procedures. We shouldn't have to wait in our country for some significant suit before we start to change.
Right. Yeah. So a couple more questions, and these are going to be brief answers, okay? So what do you think, and Dane, I'm going to start with you, and we'll just kind of go to your right, my left. What do you think is the biggest obstacle or challenge for the industry as it relates to the adoption of scanning and calibrations?
Probably the payment argument is right now what I find. Most shops say, well, I'm not getting paid for it, so they're not doing it. And unfortunately, they're hurting the consumer when doing that.
Great, thank you. Darrell?
Probably along those lines, the thinking that it's not that big a deal, that you can get by without doing it. And I like to equate it to golfing in a lightning storm. You may do that many times without having an issue, but if you have an issue, it's a big deal. And they may say it's recommended that you not do it. It's not a requirement. Well, it doesn't mean it's a good idea. You still should be doing what's smart.
Thanks, Darrell. Arlo?
Yeah, I think on the scan end, probably reimbursement, holding us back from seeing more scans on estimates. And I'd say on the calibration end, it's education and just understanding what you can do, what you can't do, what you shouldn't do.
I think as an industry we have a lot of heavy lifting to do around the calibration side, and that'll be a question I'm going to ask you here in a second, because the calibration percentages, at least that are reported through CCC, are I would say really low.
Very low.
Comparatively speaking, as to what I think anecdotally most industry leaders such as yourselves would say, I think that would probably be a lot higher. So I think that's a really good one. It's the education on the calibration side, because you don't know what you don't know. But how about you?
Kind of going to echo what you heard from the guys over here. I understand the shop side and trying to get paid and everybody to understand it, but to me it really all comes back to education. Getting people to understand. We hear all the time, well, I do this all the time and I don't have any problems. It only takes one. My boss says that all the time about different things. It only takes one, and you've got a really, really bad day. So it's all about getting people educated to understand what's required, why it's required, why it's so important, and then for the shop side to understand the liability you're opening yourself up to if you don't do it.
Right. Education, and I think I'm going to go back to the word I keep emphasizing, that's the documentation piece, because I think that helps with some of the conversations shops might be having with carriers. It's like, hey, I did it, here's what we did, and this is the why. I think I heard you say that a couple of times. This is the why, and this is what we did. And I think that helps eliminate some of that friction point. So these are going to be, we're running out of time, believe it or not. This is a great conversation. I honestly, I can go for another 2 hours, so I appreciate all the insight and wisdom all of you have shared. So, but I need for you to put your, the great Karnak hat on. I need for you to give me the future model here. Look into your crystal balls. CCC reports that just north of 50% of all estimates coming through CCC1 have a scan charge on the estimate. Now, it doesn't mean that the other 50% aren't being scanned. It just could be either they're not being scanned or maybe they're just deciding not to charge for it, right? They can certainly take that path. So we'll start with you, Bud. Crystal ball, 5 years out, we're looking at 50% today. Do you anticipate that number being higher 5 years out? And if you do, what do you think? Just give me a percentage.
I'm going to guess that the number is not going to be as high as we would like it to be. The number will go up.
Okay.
It has to go up. People have to start to understand this. So if you get up into the, well, I would think that if we get up into the 80-85% range, that we're going to be really happy. Mm-hmm. But my gut tells me it's not going to be that high. We're still going to be challenged to get people to understand that all you had to do was replace a headlight or a mirror. Guess what? You still needed to do a calibration as a result.
Yeah. So back to the point everybody said, education. Arlo.
Yeah, ditto, higher, and I think, a lot of that falls back on documentation, right? So even if you're not going to charge for the scan, still put it in your documentation, right? Mm-hmm. Complete the story of what you did for that vehicle, and that way, if we're tracking on a report, the scan is there, we can track it, and our number goes higher, we're more confident as an industry that the right things are being done because the documentation is there to support it. Mm-hmm.
So what's the number, Arlo? So we're recording this. So 5 years from today.
What was Bud's number again?
No, it's not Price is Right here. So give us a number. So it's this north of 50% today. Where do you see it 5 years from now?
5 years from now, I'm hopeful that it's in that 80 to 90% range.
Okay, thank you. Darrell?
I'm going to take a leap of faith guess, predict that we'll have at least one incident that's going to bring a lot of attention to this, and that will drive it up much higher. And I suspect it'll probably be 85%, and that's still too low.
Okay, thank you. Dane?
I hope for...
And you better say 100% because you're an OEM.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. I hope for 100%, of course.
Yeah.
But, the fact is the culture has changed and the way we do things today has to change. And it has to become as common as breathing. That's what we have to have. And the cars are going to continue to become more and more advanced, and it's just going to become more and more important every day.
So I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to say the same line of questioning, but I want you to answer it specific to calibration. So CCC reports that 9% of all estimates that are coming into CCC1 on average have at least a charge for a calibration on the estimate. So I'm going to set this question up because it has to be higher. But in September of this year, we had a pretty cataclysmic event, and that is advanced emergency braking is standard on all vehicles. And typically, if you have advanced emergency braking, there's a front point of impact. There's probably a good likelihood that you'll have some calibration or calibrations that are necessary. So we all know the number is going to go up. So I don't want to have you say, yeah, the number is going to go up because we know it is. So Dane, what do you? 5 years from today, CCC reports that X% of the estimates have a charge for calibration.
I would say 5 years from now?
5 years from today.
100%. Because by that time, 80% of the cars on the road are going to be 0 to 7 years of age. Mm-hmm. And at that point, they all have some form of ADAS on them. So, 100%.
Wow.
They should be, yeah.
Great. I love the number. Love to hear the numbers. I love the prediction. Yeah. Darrell?
55%. Again, too low, but we'll probably have a high-profile incident that will drive it up.
Yeah, and I think, and we keep coming back to the education piece, and I think that percentage that we land on is going to be really indicative of how good we do as an industry, educating everybody on the importance of identifying if the car is equipped with an ADAS feature. Because once you have that education, you know what's on the car, it makes it much easier to say, I need to do it. So Dane, you're hoping everybody looks, in repair procedures, we get the 100%. Darrell, you're taking a more pragmatic approach of, I hope, maybe it's 55%. How about you, Arlo?
Yeah, I'm going to say, certainly north of 50%.
Okay. And how about you, Bud?
You know the number's going up.
Yep.
I don't know what that number's going to go up to, but it's not going to be high enough, whatever it is.
I mean, I want 100%.
And I'm going to add something to a statement you just made, because you talked about you get the training, so that now that you've got the training, you know you need to do it. Guess what? Not having the training isn't going to be a good excuse for not doing it.
No, I mean, the information is out there. They have to go look for it. If they can't find it, they can call me and I'll direct them to it. It's out there, it's available regardless of the service that you use. It just takes a few minutes to look and find out. And that's why I want 100%, because we make everything available for them to use, and that's why there's no reason not to be 100%.
So I'll add something to that, because you reminded me of something there, the information being available. Anybody that needs this information on what type of calibrations might be required, year, make, model, you can go to the iCar Repairability Technical Support site, RTS. There's actually a page around calibrations where you can enter the year, make, model of the vehicle you're dealing with, and it will tell you all of the potential ADAS systems on that vehicle. It won't be specific to your vehicle yet, but it's, for that year, make, model, what could be on there, and then it will tell you what calibrations are required, what type of tooling you need, all of those things available on that website. Right. So the information is out there, you just have to take advantage of it.
Thanks, Bud. Well, I hate to do it, guys, but it's going to be a wrap here, so I'm going to close it up, and I want to say thank you very much for taking your time today to share your experience, your wisdom, your knowledge, your stories, Bud. I want to thank iCar for the opportunity. Thank you very much for hosting the event. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to moderate it and meet with these great industry leaders. And I would say that when I came here, I thought I knew a lot. I learned a whole lot more today. But the one thing I think I walk away with is that, and this is for everybody to know, scanning and calibrations is here to stay, and it is not going away. And we need to do a better job as an industry educating, training, documenting, researching, doing all the things that these gentlemen had just shared with us today. That being said, once again, thank you, iCar, for an awesome opportunity. My name is Dan Risley. I'm with CCC Intelligent Solutions, and that is a wrap. Scan out.